Sometimes it can feel like we have everything that we want in our life. We've got the job, we've got the finances, we've got the relationships, but yet we still feel as if we are missing something. We feel that we aren't whole. We feel that we're not living up to our purpose. And we feel that we want something more, but what is that more that we're seeking? That's what we're talking to our expert, Kathy Bleier, about today. And I'm going to introduce you to her in a second, but we're going to dive into how you can get back on track with purpose in your life. We're going to talk about what purpose is. We're going to talk about how you can start to live it in your own life. And we can talk about how, even if you have it all or think you do, what is it that's missing and how you can find that missing piece. For those who are new to the broadcast, the only reason we've grown the way that we have over the past year is because of you. We don't show ads. We don't run sponsors because we don't want to interrupt your viewing experience. We want to give you the full, unedited thing. We don't want to throw things in the middle to interrupt you. So you're the reason we've grown. Share the show with just one person who could use it the most if you take something away from this conversation. So without further ado, let's talk to Kathy Bleier. And for those who don't know Kathy has decades of experience in leadership, human resources, and talent acquisition roles, where she was responsible for leading multi-million-dollar markets and executing on company-wide training and development programs for internationally known brands. Kathy helps people and organizations navigate change, and she focuses on people who have it all, but feel that they have lost track of themselves or have lost their purpose. Kathy, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
It's great to be here, Brandon. Excited to be here for the show today.
It's exciting to have you. I remember we met in February and we met on LinkedIn. I forget whether we were connected through somebody or whether I messaged you because I saw a piece of content or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. But I love everything you're doing because you're active on the platform. You're giving to other people. You've got a podcast that's launching soon, the Full Value Podcast, which is super cool. And I know we're going to talk about that. But let me ask you this question to jump right into things.
Okay.
When you talk about purpose, what exactly do you mean? Like, what is purpose and how do you go about helping people find theirs?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? Because I think purpose is different for everyone. And I think that's where I start with every purpose, with every person, right? Because the biggest thing as a coach, when you go into a conversation, is you have to not get in the box with your client. And we have to be able to ask that client questions and ask them to start defining what they think their purpose is. They may not have it all, right? It's okay, right? Or they may have had a purpose and now they've changed in life, so their purpose is shifting. Whatever it is, it's really, what does our heart desire, right? What are we passionate about? Who do we want to be in this moment, right? We get to just wake up every day in every moment in our lives and decide who we want to be in that moment, right? Yeah. And I think for most people, purpose can be in all different forms. So it's important for you to learn what's important to you and not judge yourself by somebody else's purpose or somebody else's standard, which is hard to do because we all do that, right?
Yeah, I think the quote is, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
We can see someone else doing something that we want to do. And it's okay to it's okay to feel that bit of envy at times of, I want to be doing that. That can be a good signal of, what you want to be doing. You see someone else doing it, but then it comes down to the decision of, okay, will you continue to feel that feeling though of envy? Or will you instead maybe even contact that person and say, hey, I really want to do what you're doing. I'm just not quite sure about how I'd go about the process. Can you lend a helping hand and help me to do what it is that you're doing?
Yeah. And it's very much, Simon Sinek talks about it all the way. What is your why? Why are you doing this? Right. Kind of deal. And I think that's a big piece of it because we all have what's called shiny object syndrome, right? Where we're like, ooh, so-and-so's doing this. I want to do that. And I want to do that. And I want to do that. But the question is always going back to, is it part of my why? Does it match who I am and what I want to be doing in the world, right? And if you can really put that down on some sort of paper and then really put your intention out into the world, that makes all the difference in the world.
Let's talk about that. So putting it down on paper.
Yeah.
I can gather that you ask all your clients the question of, what does your heart desire? And it's a
Mhm.
great question, and it will cause people to slow down and think. And I like to ask people, even like, if money wasn't an option, right?
That's
If
right.
you had infinite funds, what would you be doing with your time?
Mhm.
And a lot of times people answer with, well, I'm not quite sure. Like, I'm not sure
Mhm.
what my heart desires. When people look at you and say, I'm not sure, it's hard to put down on paper what you aren't even sure of yourself. Like, how do you help people dive deeper into their why or their purpose, or help
Yeah.
them discover that?
I would say most of us answer that question as I don't know. Very few people say, yes, I know exactly what it is, right? Kind of deal. And I think a big part of it is when we're together is moving people from their head to their heart. Because in your heart, you can hear what you want. Sometimes it's that powerful pause that we have to take in that moment and sit and hear what is the vibration inside of us? What is it telling us? Brandon, I think I told you the story. So when I was laid off from my job and I had to decide what's the next chapter in my journey, I realized my whole entire life I had never paused. I had went from one job to the other. I worked so hard, as many people do out there right now. But sometimes taking that powerful pause and sitting in stillness is when we can hear what our passion is. And so a big piece of it is asking the question and then holding space for that client.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember when I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Mhm,
And it was during the phase when I discovered personal development and I started listening to people like Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins,
mhm,
and I found in listening to them and implementing what they taught me and in changing my own life, I realized I want to help other people do the same thing that I've been doing for myself. But I didn't know what that was until I gave the first group presentation that I've ever given. And it was when I first became a leader, a sales team lead. And I gave a presentation on goal setting and time management. And a lot of it was sharing the principles that I learned while listening to Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins. But when I
mhm,
gave that presentation, like what you said, I listened to my heart. And I
mhm,
felt something after that presentation that was like, wow, people came up to me. They said this was very valuable. And even during it, I felt as if something else had entered my body and was
mhm.
reanimating my body as I was speaking to the group, having them take the exercises, do the notes. I was like, this, it's weird because this isn't even me. Even to this day, when I'm giving an actual presentation to people, it's like something else steps into my body and
Yeah.
is doing that for me. And I always say, like,
Mhm,
it's not even me that's doing that. It's as if I'm channeling the universe.
mhm,
And a question that I like to ask people is, what is it that when you do it, it feels as if you're channeling the universe? It feels as
mhm,
if time is going by quickly. You're in this state of flow and you're
mhm,
really just truly enjoying the process. To me, that's what I believe. I love how you said moving from the head to the heart. It's hard to think and
mhm.
conceptualize and rationalize purpose, but it's much easier to feel it and know it
Yes.
to be true once it's found. But I feel you have to try a lot of different things in order to find that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, it's being able to move from head to heart, start talking about what is the emotion that you feel, right? Because people many times can't identify that emotion. So if you can help them kind of be able to come out and share that emotion, whatever it is, right? They could be confused, they could be angry, they could be sad right now, they could have joy right now, whatever it is, but to trust enough in the relationship to be able to move forward. I think the other thing is too, so, you were talking about passion is so mine is that I want to help humans who every day go to work, right? We're doing the best that we can. We may have our house, our job, our car, and all that, but there's moments inside of us where we feel, I'm not enough, right? And I think that we all kind of intersect there. And there's something in our life that happened that got us to that place where we can't get rid of that chatter in our heads, right? That chatter lives with us constantly. We carry it like a backpack and it pops up at these moments. So, what we want to do is shift so we can get to the place you were just talking about, which is that higher level of energy where you're channeling something deeper. And that kind of is what's taking over versus the chatter in our heads of I'm not enough.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Before I discovered personal development, that's when I felt like I was not enough. And now that you say
Mhm.
that, looking back, I can see like I totally felt that way. Like I was actually about to leave the company I was with to go somewhere else because I believed that I could have a fresh start. I believed that I could uh, be around different people, get in a different environment. I thought that would fix things for me. But really, looking back, I understand that the problem wasn't with the job. The problem was with me.
Yes.
And, I'm curious to know if you're working with someone who you spot that they have that feeling of they're not enough. Because very rarely will people just come out and say, "Kathy, I'm just not enough," right?
Mhm.
Some might do that, and some do that, right?
Yeah.
But for those who don't, like, how do you help someone transition from not enough to even get them to the point where they're able to speak about their emotions and listen to their heart? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I think the first place is you provide a very trusting relationship for your client, right? Where they feel they can say anything. And I think the way you do that is you always come from a place of curiosity, not judgment, right? Because at the end of the day, it is the client's choice what they want to do, right? I may be thinking as a coach, hey, I think this would be good, but they say they want to take action here. I have to follow that lead because that's what's going to give them success, right? I think sometimes too many coaches, teachers, bosses, it doesn't matter what role you're in, they are trying to take you down their path rather than saying, what would be the good first next step for you? Right.
Mm,
And going with that and giving strength and power and validation and supporting them in what is one step, small step they can take forward. Right. So I think the big thing is I don't have the answer. My client does. And I believe they are powerful and I believe that it is inside of them. They just need to sit and be as somebody asking powerful questions that helps bring that to the awareness level for them. I never sit in front of a client and doubt they have the answer. I know they do.
wow.
Yeah.
That belief right there
Mhm.
is a giant part of the reason you're a great coach because you
Mhm.
actually believe in the client.
Yes.
And sometimes I even get into a rut, especially when a client's going through a really tough time in their career or their life, where I feel like, okay, I feel that I know them well enough to be able to tell them what direction they should go in.
Mhm.
And I'm guilty of actually recommending that at times to
Right.
clients, especially in the
Mhm.
past when I first started, but having the belief that they have the answer and instead asking questions like what we're talking about here,
Mhm.
that's the way to go about it.
Yeah. It's a powerful question, like you said, that miracle question, right? What if money wasn't an object? What if I could give you a magic wand and you could do anything you want today? And it's just providing space, right? Holding space for someone, whether it's in coaching or in life, it's one of the best things we could do. I always talk about that even when you're friends, right? If you're the kind of person out there that your friends come to you for advice all the time, it means they trust you. They really aren't looking for your advice. They're saying, can you hold me right now? Can you hold space for me right now? And through holding that space, they will get there. They will be able to get there because they have you on the journey with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you a question that you're so used to asking other people, but I'm gonna ask
Okay.
you right now. What is your purpose?
Hmm. Yeah, great question. So, my purpose is I believe in humans and I believe in humanity. And I believe we need to get to a place where humans are working together to help each other grow, to be the best they can be. And through that, the individual changes, and through that the world changes. So that is my purpose. I feel like I was put in this life to be able to go out there and help someone shift their mindset, someone shift to their purpose, and through that they become someone powerful in the way they define powerful, and then they go on and change humanity. That's my purpose.
Wow, I love that answer. That's great. Eh, did you know that for a while before you intellectually knew that? Like, how did you come about your own purpose? When did that happen?
Yeah, it's really weird because when I first started coaching, everyone talks about find your niche, find your niche, find your niche. The riches are in the niches. You got to know your niche. And I was like, I don't know what my niche is, right? Kind of deal. And I decided to say, you know what? That's okay, right? I'm going to live in the comfort of feeling that if I keep talking, my niche will come to me. And my peeps who are supposed to find me will find me kind of deal, right? And having that faith. And I talk a lot about that, right? About faith and fear. So, but having that faith that it will happen. But now that I'm doing it and I look back on my childhood, I realize it truly was part of me my whole life. And I think that's another place, and we talk about a lot is what are some of the desires and passions you had as a child, right?
Mm.
Because when you can think about those, sometimes you might say, oh, I always wanted to be a teacher, right? And so maybe you're doing a job today that has some form of teaching in it, right? So those passions, desires, part of our values all started when we were really young. We just sometimes put them on a shelf and forget about them. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Mhm.
I feel like I'm getting a coaching session right now. I love it
Thank you.
because you're absolutely right, though. You're absolutely right. Like what I do today is I work with high performing sales professionals to
Mhm.
help them perform at their peak and create whatever the lifestyle is that they want to create, or maybe they're not sure what they want to create yet. And I help them to determine what that is, very similar to what we're talking about here. But when I think about where that comes from, you're absolutely right. I wanted to be an English teacher when I was
Mhm.
very young. And I've always been an educator. I've always been a teacher, but even more so, I've always been very curious about people who were really good at doing what they were doing. And
Mhm.
I always was curious, why is this person so good at what they're doing? And I used to deconstruct it. And I was that kid who would just ask, why, over and over and over. And some people entertained that. I found that the most successful people would entertain questions like that from a kid. But even now, when I ask people, like, what do you think it is about you that makes you so great at what it is you do?
Mhm.
And a lot of the times, the top performers will sit, a lot of them say, well, I'm not quite sure. And then you ask follow up questions, and they finally give you one thing, and you're able to dive deep into that one thing. But even when I moved into sales when I was 18, I wasn't a natural at sales by any means. I was
Yeah.
really good at being curious above
Yes.
all. And I would look at the people who were much better at me, and I still do this. I'd look at people who are much better and say, what are they doing that works? And I would take a little bit of that, and I would take a little bit of this. And I was very much a Frankenstein, if you will, of all these different things that helped other people. And I feel that that's been a common theme in my entire life. When I started my
Mhm.
business, when I moved into leadership at the company, all these different things. Like, so you saying that is very true. Like, what is it that you've known inherently since you were
Mhm.
young, something you've had through your childhood, even in, your first 5 years of being on this earth? What was something you've always been interested in? And challenge yourself to maybe dive a little bit deeper into that. I feel that we're all children at heart that just happen to get a little bit taller, a little bit wiser,
Yes.
right, in most
Yeah.
cases. So maybe you were wisest when you were in those most pure stages of your childhood, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because I wanted to be a teacher too. So interesting to hear you say that. And mine was always tell me more, right? Tell me more.
Mm,
I want to know more about that. Tell me more, right? So I was from a curious place. And that's really where I am with the client right now. I'm curious. Tell me more. When they say something, tell me more about that, right? Because that gives them the space to share more and be able to do that. And it's just like when you go to a dinner party, right? And you're like, oh, I'm not good at that small talk, right? There's two things we always learn. Number one is people love to talk about themselves, and two, as if you could just learn to say, "Tell me more." They'll handle the whole conversation for you. You really, there's not a lot of work you have to do. And so, a lot of times we'll go to a party, my husband and I, and people are like, "Oh my God, your wife's so great." When I didn't actually talk the whole time, I
yeah.
just said, "Tell me more. Tell me more about you." Right? Kind of
Yeah.
deal.
I think I got the same exact thing with my father. It reminds me of him because he is the leader of his group of friends. And I always
Mhm.
wondered, like, why is my dad the one that everyone follows? He's younger than most of the other people. He's not even the most experienced of everyone else there. Like, I think of snowmobiling specifically. And he would lead the group. He would show everyone where they're going. But my dad, you really never heard him talk about him. It's always about other people and asking people about what's important to them, asking them about their cars, or they're asking them how their wife or their husband's doing. Like, he's always curious about the other person. And I think that's,
Yes.
and because you were in leadership for the longest time in the
Mhm.
corporate world. And it's the same thing. Like, as
Mhm.
leaders, we're here to discover more about our team so that we can help them
That's
grow. Why do you think it is then that so many people, and I come from the corporate world too, and so many people just get stuck in the
mhm.
same thing? Like, they're living the same year for 5 years, for 10 years, and they're just doing the same thing over and over. And while they're not necessarily desperate to the point of change, many of them are certainly not inspired, and they're certainly
Mhm.
not, quote unquote, happy with where they are. Why do you
Mhm.
believe it is in our culture and society that so many people do get stuck in what they're doing?
Yeah. So I think it's two things. So one is, I think for ourselves, sometimes we are on this train, right? We're constantly moving. I got to go to work. I got to provide. I got to pay the bills. I got to do this. And someplace along the way, we forget about what we want and who we are, right? We get lost. We wake up and we go, what is it that I wanted, right? And I talk about it all the time. The reason I feel comfortable talking about this is because guess what? I went through that many times in my life, but the most recent, going through COVID and being furloughed and laid off, I was at that time 58, right? I'm
Mhm.
60 now. And I woke up and said, what am I going to do in the next chapter of my life? Right.
Mm.
And people were going, well, aren't you going to like think about retiring and stuff? And I was like, no, that's not me. That's not me. You obviously don't
Foreign
know me.
concept.
But I started thinking about what is it that I want? How did I get off track of what I want to do? Right. And that's why I go back to that powerful pause and taking the time to stop. But I also do think from a leader's perspective in companies, it's every company has values, right? And we put them up on the board and they're in our break rooms and they're everywhere, around. But how often do we talk to our people about what those values mean to us as a
Mm.
leader, not only to the corporation, and then talk to each person on your team and find out how does this value show up in your personal life, right? So, whatever that value is, you have 5 values as a company, and let's say one of them is, to be, I'm going to pick one off the top, like be respectful, right, to all teammates. Tell me what that means in your personal life. How does that show up in your personal life? And then when you're able to tie how their value has some kind of line to yours and then has a line to the company's value, then the person feels connected to you and they feel connected to the company, right? But so many times we're so busy as leaders moving forward, we forget to find out what's important to our employees. What are their values? What are their personal values? And how do they truly align with the company's values? And I think if you can do that with your team, you can really create a powerful team where everybody is helping each other's values and everybody is helping make each other person's dream come true.
Ooh, that's everyone should rewind for especially leaders,
Yeah.
rewind 2, 3
Yeah.
minutes there and re-listen to that over and over and over, because I think that that's valid for teams just
Mhm.
as much as it's valid, if not more than it's valid for relationships in your
Yeah.
life. Like, my wife and I recently, we got these cute little journals, and I said to my wife, I was like, I just heard a podcast recently about someone mentioned, like, when's the last time you asked your significant other what their goals were, what their
Mm.
values were?
Mhm.
And I'm thinking of that and I'm like, oh my God, I can't remember the last time I asked her what her goals were.
Mhm.
And I got home and I asked her, and she's like, way too late for that conversation. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll talk about it in the morning. And what I did instead was I took that journal that we bought and I wrote down what I envisioned the
Mhm.
next 5, 10 years of our life and relationship looking like.
Mhm.
And I said, so I wrote in this journal exactly what I just said. And I would love if you did the same thing. I said, I'm not going to pressure you, because she's very much an individual where you can't tell her what to do, which I don't think you should tell anyone what to do. But
Yeah.
you kind of have to make it her idea to do it. So I left it on the table and I said, it'd be really cool if you just look through what I wrote. And if you get some time, write down what you want. And she wrote down the next 5 to 10 years of her life. And I said, don't read mine until after you write yours.
Yeah.
And we read each other's afterwards together. And it really reaffirmed that we want very similar things in a lot of aspects,
Yes.
but at the same time, she wants some very different things than what I wanted, things that I never even knew that she thought about, whether it's where we're going to live, when it comes to family, when it comes to future children. And we didn't compromise because I don't like that word, but we had a really great understanding of where each other stood. And I was able to say, I'd be perfectly okay with this. And I think that I'd actually like this more than what I wrote down. And we did that with each other's different things. But it's just as important with your
Yes.
team, and it's just
Mhm.
as important with yourself. Like, when's the last time you've written down what brings you joy? When's the last time you've written
Yes.
down what you want your future to look like, you know?
And that's such a great question, Brandon, right? What is it that brings you joy, right? What is it that is absolute passion for you? Is I love that exercise. I think that is so incredible. I wish everyone in the world would take notice of that and do that right now. I think the biggest thing though is when you do that is not how do you walk away from judgment if the other person's is different, right?
Oh, great question.
Right? Because the reality is sometimes it may not always align. That doesn't mean we have to like, okay, that's it. We're splitting up. We have two different purposes. It's how can they work together, right?
Mm.
And where is the commonality, right? Is the commonality that you both value family, that you value your relationship, that you value trust, joy, things like that. So stepping into somewhere where you can take a value test together, you that would be great. The other thing is it's really interesting. People will say to me, oh my god, you and your husband, you're so great together, kind of deal. And I laugh, right? Because no marriage is perfect, right? We all
Mhm.
go through our ups and downs and the I love you in this moment, or I don't love you right now. I like you a lot, but I don't love you, right? Kind of deal. And in my journey to become a coach, what I realized is I can't change him, right? I can only show up as the best person I can be. And when I started working on myself and showing up as the best person I could be, he started saying, I want some of that.
Mhm.
What I like what's happening with her. Oh my God, that's so cool. It became infectious. So
Yeah.
then he started saying, how do I get that? Right, kind of deal. So I think if you're in a relationship, if you're in a job, if you're in a friend zone, whatever it is you're in, and you want to change that situation, it has to start with you. And if you can show up every single moment as the best you can be, that'll bring other people along with you because that's the only thing we can control. I can't control someone else, right? I can't make them be someone else. What I can do is show up as the best person I am, and then I can accept you and have no judgment, no matter who you are right now at this moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's gonna be one hell of a soundbite because
Thank you.
that is so true, though. I mean, beautifully said, number 1, and I completely agree. I mean, my wife has made some significant changes in her life that
Mhm,
inspired me. And
mhm,
I've made changes in my past, whether it's with my body or financially, where we didn't necessarily even talk about like what we were doing, but because one of us made a change, the other one followed suit and
mhm.
they made progress as well. So it's very much a product of who you surround yourself with too, because
Yes,
it's infectious in both ways. So
yes,
if you're trying to improve over here, but over here, it's the exact opposite of what you're looking to achieve, maybe it's time to reassess the people that you're spending time around, or even what you're listening to or watching, or the people you're having conversations with, or the conversation itself. It's infectious on both ends, but when you can commit to growth in one area, when you can, like what you said here, pause just for a minute and reflect and ask yourself these powerful questions, and then just seek to make progress towards that, that is in itself a leader, because from that, people are going to go by your example, and they're going
mhm,
to also seek to improve and seek to change most of the time, not all the time,
yes,
but we don't do it. So they improve, we do it. And that's a result of us
yeah.
changing ourselves and working on ourselves.
Yeah, and it's what, Brené Brown talks about, right? Being vulnerable as a leader, right? And when I use the word leader, I'm not just saying leader at work. I think we all lead in our lives, in somewhere in our lives, right? Whether we're a parent, whether we're a friend, whether we are at work, we're all in our relationship, we all play the role of a leader. So it's by recognizing that and saying, today I'm going to lead in the best way possible that I can. I'm going to show up in the best way I want to show up. And then, you know what? Release judgment over that. So I'll give you an example for myself, because I think usually sharing stories, it kind of people go, oh, yeah, that's me. Right.
Yeah.
So, when I became a coach, it was like, who's going to listen to me? Right. Yeah. I had decades of experience in HR, management, talent, but who would want to listen to me? And the more I went through my journey of becoming a coach, I found that all of us use this limited language in our heads that we say out loud that limits us. So for me, it was every time I would start talking on a podcast or something else, I would say, well, I'm a new coach, right? I'm new. I'm new, right? Just started my business. I'm new, right? And that limiting language was limiting me.
Mm.
It wasn't allowing me to show up as my best self. When the reality is, I've been coaching my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now I went to school, and yes, I have different cadences that I've added to my repertoire, but I've been a coach my whole life. And so when I switched to I am a coach, that's when I started becoming who I am today, right?
Wow.
And I think that people do that all the time, right? They'll take a job, and their first day of work, they go, well, I'm new here and I just started. And, of course, I want to hear what you guys have to say because you've been doing it longer, right? But walk in and say, I am this role, whatever that role is, right? I am the teacher of the classroom. There's something that brought you there, whether you believe in God, the universe, whatever that power, something brought you there based on your journey. That was your fate and your destiny to be there. So don't limit it by putting these adjectives in front of it of I'm new, I just got started. I don't know a lot right now. Whatever it is that you're putting, remove those adjectives and say I am.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your podcast is literally called, it's upcoming for everyone listening. So by the time you listen, it might be out. Check the description and make sure you check it out. It's the Full Value Podcast. Now,
Yes.
when you say full value, is what you just said, assuming the I am and being that
Yes.
now, is that being full value, or is full value something different? What is that?
So it's a combination, right? It is living in the I am, right? So I'm doing it with two friends of mine, two amazing coaches, my friend Sheila Hatch and my friend Mindy Villaroman. Great guests. You should have them on your show.
Yeah,
I'll do a
I'd
little
love
plug
to.
for them. So the three of us are doing this podcast together because we met actually in the school of coaching that we all went to, which was IPEC School of Coaching. And we believe that everyone has the potential to live at their full value, but we don't because we get stuck, right? And we get stuck in a lot of different ways, right? Some of it is we just life goes on. We start working, and we never stop to pause. Some of it is we are carrying this baggage, as I talked about before, of we are not enough. We're not smart enough. We're not rich enough. We're not tall enough, short enough. We're not skinny enough. We're not whatever it is that you've been told in your life somewhere, and you've put it into your limiting language. And you may not hear it every day, but it is what stops you from moving forward because you hear it. It's the chatter in our heads. And when we can move out of our heads and into our soul, we can figure out and become aware of where did that chatter come from? When was the first time I ever felt that way? And usually, as a coach, if I ask somebody and say, when didn't you feel that way? When were you enough? Right? And they talk about those feelings, we can bring up the awareness to you are enough, right? And have them take that with them and be able to move forward from that. Yeah.
That awareness is everything, though,
Yeah.
because that
Mhm.
awareness is how you move from an unconscious state of flow of all these thoughts that you've
Yes.
lived with for years that you might have gotten from, like what we said, your environment or from your family or from even your parents. And
Yeah.
they meant well for you, but they didn't understand these principles and they didn't work on it in the way that we do now, many of them at least. When you have that awareness, you're finally able to realize that you don't have to accept the inner chatter that's happening. And
Yeah.
while you might get some chatter saying, "Oh, I'm new at this. I don't know if I'm the authority or if I'm right to speak on this." That's very different. The reaction that your body has to that, rather than saying, "Wait, I've been doing this my whole life. Like
Yes.
I am capable of this. I've helped many people." And your body changes, your tone changes. The thought that you have creates a different emotion, which creates a different body response, right? And it's really about, number one, like you said, that awareness. And number two, reminding yourself, even if
Mhm.
you have to, by implanting it in your life in the form of put a picture in your home that
Mhm.
says something that inspires you, that says something that you want to embody so that you can start having new beliefs. You generally become what you see and what you hear
Yes.
and what you think about most of the time. And it's hard to think otherwise when you've got post-it notes on your mirror that
Yeah.
say empowering and strong things. Like eventually it's like you're brainwashing yourself to believe certain things. But and some people might say, well, is that natural to brainwash yourself to believe that? Well, that's how you adopted these beliefs in the first place. You were
Yes.
brainwashed by something, the
Yeah.
media, other people telling you. So if you're already brainwashed in a specific way, why not choose your programming instead of living with the programming that was given to you?
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's subtle, right? So I love my parents dearly. They're incredible people. They've done everything for us. But an example for me is my parents were immigrants, came to this country, and they wanted the best for us. They wanted us to get a college education that they never got. So for them, it was always, if it was a B, why wasn't it an A? If it was an A, why wasn't it an A plus, right? So somewhere deep inside, I carried that with me that unless it was an A plus, it wasn't good enough kind of deal. And my parents didn't mean to do that. I know in their life they wanted the best they wanted. But as I went through life, perfection became something I was always shooting for. And we all know perfection doesn't exist, right?
Mhm.
Well, in some ways. However, there's another reframe to look at it is that we are all perfect as we are. And if we can accept ourselves for being perfect as we are right now in this moment, rather than always shooting for perfection, leave the judgment, let ourselves go and be enough for this moment. That's where we win, right? Kind of deal. So it's also interesting. I was talking, I went to the IPEC School of Coaching, and one of the things we talk about there is energy, right? So if you're out in the corporate world, you probably have taken some time a Myers-Briggs test, you've taken predictive index, you've taken, I can name probably any strength 2.0, whatever it is that you've taken.
Yeah.
Where we do an ELI test, which is an energy leadership index. And so I do this with all my clients. And it's different because the basis of it is um, that it's not about this is who you are and you can't change. It's much more about this is who you are in an everyday state. And then when stress happens in your life, this is how you show up. And if
Mm.
you can understand the difference of how you show up when you're in that in your everyday life, when you're feeling joy, and then life happens, right? And when life happens, sometimes we show up differently. So if we can figure that out and be aware that we're showing up differently right then in the moment and shift our energy to saying, I want to be at the best place that I normally am, then that's a huge shift. So an example might be that on an everyday life, I show up, I'll share my ELI. I show up, I want the whole world to win, right? I
Yep.
want you to win, I want me to win kind of deal, right? But sometimes under stress in my life, I used to go to a victim mentality where everything's happening to me. I can't get out of this. How did this happen to me? Right kind of deal. And by taking my ELI and working with a coach, I learned so much about, why do I go there? What makes me go there? Right, kind of deal. I'm still the same person, kind of deal. So now it's what's great about it is I go there because we all go there. There's
Mhm.
none of us who don't go there who go, why is this happening to me right now? Right. It's about not making judgment on yourself and that you say, I'm noticing I'm here right now. And how can I shift? How can I shift to my best self that I always am of in an everyday place? And that's really what coaching can do for you. So, but if you love more information on the ELI, contact me. I'd love to talk to you about it. So, yeah.
I love that. Everyone,
Yeah.
Kathy's information is going to be in the comments and the description based on where you're watching and listening right now. And I resonate completely with what you said, because I'm very similar to you in the everyday state of I want everyone to win. I want to help people unleash the best version of themselves at all times. But when I'm stressed, that's when I become like, I push people aside and I'm just like laser focused, bulldozer focused on one thing. I'm like, I need to fix it. I need to solve the cause of this stress. And my wife will look at me and she'll literally be like, Brandon, you're stressed right now. Breathe.
Yes.
She'll
Breathe.
say it in a better way than that. But
Right.
it's the awareness of once she says that, and once I realize that I'm feeling that way, I'm in that altered state, that's when I'm like, ooh, I'm in that moment right now. And then you get to observe it from like a third person standpoint, this way that you're being. And it's like very interesting how I'm feeling this and how I'm observing this. So really, the more aware you can be of that situation, the better. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that assessment there.
Yeah. And start asking yourself questions, right? What's making me show up like this right now? What is it that's making me show up? And then the reframe question is, how could I show up at my best right now? Right? Like we
Mm.
talked about before, you can't control anyone else in a moment, but you can control yourself. So, how do I want to show up in this very moment?
Absolutely amazing. I
Mhm,
love that.
mhm.
Your upcoming podcast, Full Value,
Yes.
if you had to give me the one sentence mission of this podcast that you're doing with your co-hosts, what would you tell me people can expect once they listen?
Yeah, so it's three women who are been on a journey for themselves, finding themselves and trying to live their life at full value. And we are out there hoping people join us. And that if you're not feeling like you're living your life at full value right now, hoping the show will inspire you to be able to get there. It'll be us, but we'll also have guests who have gone through a lot of things and will tell you how they got to the place of their living their full value right now. So I think it's going to be really exciting, and I would love for you to join us, and hopefully, Brandon, we can even have you on. So I would love
Yeah.
to have that. Yeah,
I'm excited. I'd love to have a
yeah,
panel discussion with all of you
yeah,
on this show and just riff on all these different topics. So
yeah.
so people who are listening, you've got something to look forward to. The Full Value podcast is upcoming. Keep an eye on the description and the comments, because by the time you listen, that show might be available for you. So you can dive in with Kathy and her co-hosts, and so that you can really start to live your life at full value. Kathy, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you
It's
very
been great
much.
being here. Thanks, Brandon.
This was an incredible conversation around you believe you have it all, or you think you should feel and believe that you have it all, but you're just missing that one thing. You're struggling to really encapsulate what your purpose is and how you can begin making steps towards that. And in this discussion with Kathy that we just had, I hope you took away one or two things that you can begin implementing and using immediately in order to make steps towards that. Because information is great, but action is the cure all. What are you going to take from this conversation and use that will help you to move towards purpose? I love the pause and reflect idea that Kathy shared. I love the idea of awareness and being aware of how you are feeling and behaving in the moment, and how you are in a normal state and how you are in an altered state of stress, or when you're facing a challenge, whatever it is. And then asking yourself the question of, how could I show up in this moment? What's causing me to act this way, to feel this way, to display actions in this way? And so much from this conversation. Be sure to go back, listen to your favorite part, share it with a friend. You're the reason we've grown the way we have. And links are in the description to the upcoming Full Value Podcast, as well as Kathy's social medias, so you can follow her and start a conversation directly with Kathy. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for being here. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.